On a bright afternoon in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods, the sun cast a glare over the glass buildings and streets filled with high-end vehicles. The neighborhood exuded an air of exclusivity, with its tree-lined streets, upscale boutiques, and luxury cars gliding silently along the pavement. Inside Hamilton Prestige Motors, a dealership known for catering to an elite clientele, the atmosphere was equally polished. Gleaming SUVs and sports cars sat under the soft glow of showroom lights, their sleek designs and high price tag a testament to the dealership's reputation. At the center of it all stood Madeline Burke, the 47-year-old manager, a woman who had spent nearly 2 decades in luxury auto sales. She was the undisputed gatekeeper of this domain, ensuring that only the most serious buyers walked away with the keys to one of the high-end vehicles. Madeline prided herself on her ability to read people, to discern who belonged and who didn't. She had an eye for class, wealth, and the subtle cues that separated the genuine buyers from the window shoppers. Her confidence was unshakable, her authority unquestioned. She ruled the showroom with the precision of a seasoned professional, and her team respected or feared her enough to follow her lead without question. When the bell above the glass doors chimed, signaling a new arrival, Madeline glanced up from her mahogany desk. A man in his mid-40s stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple navy hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. His relaxed posture and unreadable expression gave nothing away as he glanced around the polished showroom, taking in the lineup of luxury vehicles and the framed awards lining the walls. Madeline took one look at him and made her assessment. He wasn't a buyer. She turned to her sales associate, Greg, who had been eyeing the man curiously, and murmured, "Don't waste your time. He's just looking." Greg hesitated, sensing something different about the man, but he said nothing. He had worked with Madeline long enough to know that when she made a call, no one questioned it. The man, however, wasn't there to browse. He strolled toward a brand-new 2024 Range Rover Autobiography, its sleek black finish reflecting the showroom lights. He ran his fingers lightly along the driver's side door, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. After a moment, he turned and scanned the showroom, his eyes locking onto Madeline. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward her. "Excuse me," he said, his tone calm and polite. "I'm interested in that Range Rover over there. I'd like to know more about it." Madeline barely hid her sigh. She had dealt with this before, men who wandered in, hoping to impress someone with a test drive they had no intention of following through on. She offered a tight-lipped smile. "That's a fully loaded autobiography model," she said, her voice clipped. "Top-tier luxury, $165,000. The man nodded. "Sounds like what I'm looking for." Madeline folded her arms. "Are you aware of our financing options? A purchase like that requires either substantial credit or an upfront payment." The man held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I won't need financing," he replied. Madeline forced a polite chuckle. "I see. Well, if you're serious about purchasing, we'll need to run a soft credit check before moving forward. It's company policy." Greg shifted uneasily beside her. They both knew that wasn't company policy, but the man showed no reaction, no annoyance, no protest. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black car holder. "I'd like to test drive it," he said. Madeline's expression stiffened. "We don't offer test drives on vehicles at that price point without verified proof of income," she said smoothly. "You understand?" The man's lips curved slightly, almost as if he had expected this. "Oh, I understand," he said. But Madeline had no idea what was coming next. Greg, who had been pretending not to listen, felt his stomach tighten. He had seen Madeline pull this move before, turning away potential buyers who didn't fit the image of their clientele. But something about this man's demeanor felt different. He wasn't getting defensive or arguing. He was just watching, waiting. Madeline, however, remained firm. "I'm sorry," she said, plastering on a polite but distant smile. "But for a car of that value, we require serious inquiries only. We've had issues in the past with people wasting our time, joyriding, then walking away." The man didn't blink. "Joyriding," he repeated. "It's nothing personal," Madeline added quickly, though the insincerity dripped from her tone. I'm sure you understand. Greg saw it then, the tiny shift in the man's expression, just for a second. A flicker of something colder, sharper, beneath his calm exterior. But just as quickly as it came, it was gone. The man exhaled through his nose, nodding slowly. All right. No test drive. Got it. Madeline gave a satisfied tilt of her head, already turning her attention toward a different customer, an older man in a tailored suit browsing a Bentley across the showroom. But before she could dismiss the conversation entirely, the man in the hoodie spoke again. What about cash buyers? He asked. Madeline glanced back, mildly irritated now. Excuse me? If someone wanted to pay in full, no financing, no credit check, would that change your test drive policy? Madeline almost laughed. People like him didn't buy six-figure cars in cash. They didn't just walking off the street and drop that kind of money. I appreciate your enthusiasm, she said, her voice sugary sweet. But I'm sure you can understand that we have policies in place for a reason. For the first time, a shadow of amusement crossed the man's face. I see, he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. So what would it take? Madeline's smile thinned. I just told you, she said, her patience beginning to fray. We require proof of serious intent. Our vehicles are highly sought after and we can't have. I understand, the man cut in, his voice still eerily calm. I'm just trying to figure out where the bar is. What does a serious customer look like to you? Silence. For the first time, Greg saw something flicker in Madeline's expression, an almost imperceptible pause before she quickly masked it with short, breathy laugh. I think we're done here, she said crisply. If you like to browse, feel free, but I have other customers to assist. Greg expected the man to push back, maybe even storm out. Instead, he just nodded, the corner of his mouth tugging upward in something that wasn't quite a smile. Understood, he said. And just like that, he turned and walked away. But something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, almost calculating, left Greg with an uncomfortable feeling in his gut. He had a hunch Madeline had just made a mistake. The man didn't leave the showroom. Instead, he casually inspected another vehicle, a Mercedes-Benz G-Class, running his fingers along the chrome handle as if admiring it. Greg watched as one of the junior salesmen, Jared, hesitated before stepping forward. Hey there, sir, Jared said, putting on his best friendly salesman grin. Need any help with that one? The man turned to face him, his expression unreadable. Yeah, actually, he said, I was looking at the Range Rover earlier, but I was told test drives are off limits unless I prove I'm serious. That true? Jared blinked, caught off guard. Well. Before he could stumble through an answer, Madeline appeared beside him like a shadow. Her lips were still curved in that polished, professional smile, but her eyes were sharp. Jared, I'll take it from here, she said. Jared looked like he wanted to say something, but one glance at Madeline, and he backed away, disappearing toward the reception desk. The man watched the exchange with quiet amusement. You sure do keep a tight leash on your employees, he mused. Madeline didn't bite. I thought I made myself clear, she said smoothly. We cater to a specific clientele here, and we can't accommodate every request. A beat of silence. Then the man chuckled softly, shaking his head. You know, he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, I've been to a lot of dealerships. Some good, some bad. But I've never had someone work this hard to not sell me a car. Madeline's expression hardened. That's not what's happening here. No. The man tilted his head slightly. Then let's make it easy. I'll write a check right now. Full amount, no financing, no games. Just business. Greg, who had been pretending not to listen from behind the desk, felt his stomach tighten. Madeline stared at the man for a long second, her fingers twitching slightly at her sides. She wasn't stupid. If he really was a cash buyer, shutting him down outright could backfire. But she wasn't convinced, and she wasn't about to be proven wrong in front of her own team. That's a generous offer, she said, her voice silky smooth. But as I said, it's company policy. You'd need to provide documentation before we can move forward. The man held her gaze for a moment, then slowly pulled out his wallet, flipping it open. A black American Express Centurion card sat inside. Greg's eyes widened. Madeline didn't move. The man let the silence stretch, let her take it in, then tucked the car back into his pocket. "No test drive, huh?" he said finally, his voice laced with something Greg couldn't quite place. Madeline lifted her chin, her professional mask still intact. "I'm afraid not." The man studied her for another long beat, then without another word, he turned and walked away. But Greg could see it. Madeline had just stepped into something she wasn't ready for. The tension in the showroom was palpable. Madeline stood stiffly, her jaw set, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had just dismissed a man who had flashed a Centurion card, the kind of card only high-net-worth individuals carried. And yet, she had still refused him. Greg swallowed hard. That didn't look good. Across the room, the man didn't storm out. He didn't even seem rattled. Instead, he took his time, walking past the rows of high-end cars as if he owned the place. He ran a hand over the smooth hoods, nodding slightly to himself, almost like he was taking notes. Then the glass door swung open, and a sharply dressed man in his mid-50s stepped inside. His graying hair and tailored navy suit exuded authority, and his polished leather shoes barely made a sound against the tile floor. Greg's stomach dropped. It was Elliot Gaines, the regional director. Madeline saw him too. She straightened immediately, her entire demeanor shifting. "Mr. Gaines," she greeted, her voice light and professional. "What a pleasant surprise. What brings you in today?" Elliot's gaze barely flicked to her. Instead, he was looking at the man in the hoodie, and then his face lit up. "There he is." Elliot strode forward, hand outstretched. "Jordan, I was just about to call you." Greg felt the air shift in the room. Madeline's face drained of color. The man, Jordan, finally cracked a small smile, shaking Elliot's hand with an easy familiarity. "Good to see you, Elliot," he said smoothly. "Was just having a look around." Elliot chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "I told you this is one of our finest locations. You'll love it here." Greg swore he saw it then, the moment it hit Madeline. Her posture was too rigid, her breath too shallow. "Wait," she said, her voice quieter now, more cautious. "You know each other?" Elliot blinked, finally turning to her. "Of course," he said, then with a broad grin. He gestured to Jordan. "Meet Jordan Ellis, the new CEO of Hamilton Prestige Motors." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Greg didn't move. Neither did anyone else. But Madeline, her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her entire body locked up. Jordan just watched her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and slid his hands into his pockets. "Miss Burke," he said evenly, "you just refused to sell a car to your new boss." The weight of those words sent a shockwave through the showroom. The employees stared, some in shock, some in poorly hidden amusement. Greg's heart pounded in his chest. He had known something was off. And Madeline, for the first time since he had met her, looked genuinely afraid. The silence in the showroom was thick, suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. Madeline blinked rapidly, her brain scrambling for footing. This had to be a mistake, a joke. The man standing before her, the man she had just humiliated, couldn't be her new CEO. And yet, Elliot had said it out loud, in front of everyone. Jordan let the words settle before he spoke again. "I have to say," he mused, tilting his head slightly, "I expected to get a sense of how this dealership operates today." A pause. "I didn't expect this." Madeline's stomach twisted. She had been in sales for over 2 decades. She had handled difficult clients, high-pressure deals, VIPs who expected the world on a silver platter. But this was something else entirely. Elliot finally seemed to catch on to the tension, glancing between them. "Wait," he said, "what happened?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He let the moment stretch, watching Madeline the way a teacher watches a student about to fail a test. Then, casually, he turned to Greg. "What's your name?" Greg's mouth was dry. Greg, sir." Jordan nodded. "You've been here long?" 3 years. 3 years, Jordan repeated, letting out a soft chuckle and shaking his head. "Let me ask you something, Greg." if I walked in here today wearing a suit, speaking the exact same words I just said, would I have had to pull out my credit card just to be taken seriously? Greg hesitated. He knew the answer. Everyone did. But saying out loud could cost him his job. Jordan seemed to sense his hesitation and offered a slight nod. You don't have to answer that. Then, finally, he turned back to Madeline. She had regained some of her composure, but her usual sharp confidence was gone, replaced by something uncertain. Mr. Ellis, she started, her voice smooth and practiced, the way people talk when they're trying to control the damage. I truly apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Jordan's brow lifted. That's what you're going with. Madeline forced a chuckle, but it fell flat. I was simply following store policy. We have strict guidelines when it comes to test drives on luxury models. I would have handled any customer the same way. Jordan studied her, then slowly turned toward Elliot. Elliot, he said, his tone casual, tell me, when did Hamilton Prestige Motors start requiring a soft credit check before customers could even sit inside a car? Elliot's brows furrowed. We don't. The last thread of Madeline's defense snapped. Jordan let the truth settle, watching her. He wasn't raising his voice or throwing a scene, but somehow that was worse. Madeline's palms were damp now, and for the first time, she felt it. She wasn't in control anymore, and Jordan wasn't finished. So, just to be clear, he said, his voice calm and deliberate, you refused to sell me a car because I didn't look like someone who could afford it. You made assumptions. You dismissed me. You lied about company policy. And when I called you on it, you doubled down. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. Tell me, Madeline, what exactly does a serious customer look like to you? The words hit like a punch to the gut. She scrambled for footing, forcing a tight smile. Mr. Ellis, I assure you that wasn't my intent at all. We have high standards here, and I was simply ensuring. Jordan cut in, raising a brow. High standards. Madeline stammered. Greg, Jared, and the other employees stood frozen, watching as their manager unraveled. Elliot cleared his throat, stepping in. Jordan, obviously this isn't how we want any of our customers treated. I'm not a customer, Jordan said coolly. I'm the CEO, and I just watch my own sales manager decide on site who does and doesn't belong here. The room went still. Madeline felt the blood drain from her face. She had always operated with a level of untouchability. She knew the business inside and out, had been here for years. She had built a reputation as someone who got results. But none of that mattered now. Jordan turned back to her, his expression unreadable. I came here undercover for a reason, he said. To see how our customers are treated. To see if the values we claim to uphold are actually being practiced. He paused and added, I've seen enough. Madeline's chest tightened. I understand your concern, she tried, her voice wavering slightly. But surely we can talk about this. I've been a valuable part of this company for years. I've closed deals that no one else could. My track record speaks for itself. Jordan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You're right, he said. Your track record does speak for itself. A flicker of relief crossed her face until he added, That's why you're done here. Madeline froze. For the first time in her entire career, she had nothing to say. Jordan's voice remained steady. I don't run a company that turns people away based on appearances. If that's a problem for you, then this was never. The man, unfazed by Madeline's dismissive attitude, pulled out a Black American Express Centurion card, a symbol of immense wealth and exclusivity. The card, often referred to as a black card, was reserved for individuals with significant financial means, and its appearance at showroom should have been a clear signal to Madeline that this man was no ordinary customer. But her assumptions about his appearance, his casual hoodie, worn sneakers, and unassuming demeanor clouded her judgment. She remained firm, refusing to budge, even as Greg, her sales associate, grew increasingly uneasy. Greg had worked with Madeline long enough to know her patterns, her biases, and her tendency to judge customers based on their outward appearance. But this time, something felt different. The man's calm, almost unnerving composure suggested he was not someone to be underestimated. Yet Madeline, blinded by her own preconceptions, doubled down on her dismissive attitude, convinced she was right. The man, however, didn't argue or storm out as many others might have. Instead, he watched Madeline with a quiet, calculating demeanor, as if waiting for the right moment to act. His patience was unsettling, and it left Greg with a growing sense of dread. The man's calmness was not the calmness of someone who had been defeated. It was the calmness of someone who knew something Madeline didn't. That moment of revelation came when Elliot Gaines, the regional director, entered the showroom. Elliot was a sharply dressed man in his mid-50s, his graying hair and tailored navy suit exuding authority. His polished leather shoes barely made a sound against the tiled floor as he strode in, his presence immediately commanding attention. Madeline, ever professional, straightened immediately, her demeanor shifting to one of deference and respect. "Mr. Gaines," she greeted, her voice light and professional. "What a pleasant surprise. What brings you in today?" But Elliot's gaze barely flicked to her. Instead, he was looking at the man in the hoodie, and then his face lit up. "There he is," Elliot exclaimed, striding forward with his hand outstretched. "Jordan, I was just about to call you." The room seemed to freeze. Madeline's face drained of color as Elliot introduced a man as Jordan Ellis, the new CEO of Hamilton Prestige Motors. The revelation sent shockwaves through the showroom. Greg, who had been watching the exchange with growing unease, felt his stomach drop. The man in the hoodie, Jordan Ellis, was not just a potential buyer. He was the new head of the company. The employees, who had been quietly observing the interaction, exchanged stunned glances. The air grew thick with tension as the weight of the situation settled over everyone. Jordan, calm and composed, turned to Madeline, his expression unreadable. "Miss Burke," he said evenly, "you just refused to sell a car to your new boss." The words hung in the air like a bombshell, and for a moment, no one moved or spoke. Madeline, once confident and untouchable, stood frozen, her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Her entire body seemed to lock up, her usual sharp confidence replaced by something uncertain, something fearful. Jordan didn't raise his voice or throw a scene. Instead, he addressed Madeline with a calm, deliberate tone that was somehow more intimidating than anger would have been. He exposed her biases and the lies she had told about company policies, making it clear that her actions were not just a personal failure, but a reflection of a toxic culture within the dealership. "I came here undercover for a reason," Jordan said, his voice steady. "To see how our customers are treated. To see if the values we claim to uphold are actually being practiced." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I've seen enough." Madeline, unraveling under the weight of his words, tried to defend herself. She cited her years of service, her track record of closing deals that no one else could, and her contributions to the company's success. But Jordan was unmoved. "You're right," he said, nodding slightly. "Your track record does speak for itself." For a brief moment, a flicker of relief crossed Madeline's face, until he added, "That's why you're done here." The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. Madeline, who had always operated with a level of untouchability, who had built a reputation as someone who got results, was now facing the consequences of her own actions. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, to discern who belonged and who didn't. But in this moment, she realized how wrong she had been. Her assumptions, her biases, and her refusal to see beyond appearances had led to her downfall. Jordan's calm but firm approach exposed not just her personal failures, but the deeper issues within the dealership's culture. "I don't run a company that turns people away based on appearances," Jordan said, his voice unwavering. "If that's a problem for you, then this was never the place for you to begin with." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Madeline, left standing alone, realized too late that her downfall was a result of her own actions and prejudices. As Jordan walked away, the tension in the showroom began to ease, but the impact of what just transpired lingered. The employees, who had watched the exchange in stunned silence, felt a shift in the air. Jordan's actions weren't just about removing a bad manager. They were about challenging the culture of assumptions and biases that had taken root within the dealership. For Greg, who had sensed something was off in the beginning, the moment was both validating and unsettling. He had always admired Madeline's professionalism and her ability to close deals, but he had also seen the darker side of her leadership, the dismissive attitude, the snap judgments, the way she treated those she deemed unworthy. Now, as he watched her standing there, her usual confidence shattered, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. But he also knew that this was a necessary reckoning, not just for Madeline but for the entire dealership. Jordan's calm but firm approach had exposed a deeper issue within the company, one that went beyond Madeline's personal failures. It was a culture that had allowed assumptions and biases to dictate how customers were treated, a culture that prioritized appearances over integrity. Jordan's decision to come undercover, to see firsthand how the dealership operated, spoke volumes about a commitment to creating a company that upheld its values. As he turned to Elliot, the regional director, and began discussing the need for changes in the hiring and training process, it was clear that this was just the beginning. The dealership, and perhaps the entire company, was in for a transformation, one that would challenge long-standing practices and push everyone to do better. For Madeline, the loss of her job was secondary to the lesson she had failed to learn, that true professionalism and integrity required treating everyone with respect regardless of appearances. She had always believed that her ability to read people, to discern who belonged and who didn't, was one of her greatest strengths. But in the end, it was her greatest weakness. Her assumptions, her biases, and her refusal to see beyond appearances had cost her not just her job, but her reputation. As she stood there, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest like a vice, she realized that this was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The story of Madeline Burke and Jordan Ellis serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of judgment and the importance of questioning our biases. It's easy to assume, easy to judge people based on appearances or first impressions. But how often do we stop and question our own assumptions? How often do we consider the impact of our actions on others? Jordan's calm but firm approach exposed not just Madeline's personal failures, but the deeper issues within the dealership's culture. It was a wake-up call, not just for Madeline, but for everyone who witnessed the exchange. The smallest decisions, the seemingly insignificant moments, can have the biggest consequences. And in a world where appearances often overshadow substance, it's more important than ever to challenge our biases and strive to do better. As the employees of Hamilton Prestige Motors returned to their tasks, the air felt lighter, different. The tension that had gripped the showroom was gone, replaced by a sense of anticipation. Change was coming, and while it would undoubtedly be challenging, it was also necessary. For Greg, who had always tried to see the best in people, the moment was a reminder of the importance of integrity and respect. For Madeline, it was a harsh but necessary lesson in humility and self-awareness. And for Jordan, it was a reaffirmation of his commitment to creating a company that lived up to its values. The story of that afternoon in Buckhead would be told and retold, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the power of integrity, the importance of questioning our biases, and the impact of our actions on others. As Jordan walked away, the weight of the moment settled over the showroom like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. The employees, who had watched the exchange in stunned silence, felt a shift in the air, a palpable change that signaled the end of one era and the beginning of another. Jordan's actions weren't just about removing a bad manager. They were about challenging the culture of assumptions and biases that had taken root within Hamilton Prestige Motors. For years, the dealership had operated under a veneer of exclusivity, where appearances often mattered more than integrity, and where judgments were made based on superficial criteria. Madeline Burke, once the undisputed queen of the showroom, had embodied that culture. She had been the gatekeeper, the one who decided who belonged and who didn't, and her downfall was a stark reminder of the dangers of such a mindset. Left standing alone, Madeline realized too late that her dismissal wasn't just about her refusal to sell a car to the new CEO. It was about the deeper, more insidious biases that had guided her actions for years. Her downfall was a result of her own actions and prejudices, and it served as a wake-up call not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed the exchange. The story of Madeline and Jordan is a powerful reminder of the consequences of judgment and the importance of questioning our biases. It's easy to assume, easy to judge people based on appearances or first impressions. But how often do we stop and question our own assumptions? How often do we consider the impact of our actions on others? Jordan's calm but firm approach exposed not just Madeline's personal failures, but the deeper issues within the dealership's culture. It was a wake-up call, not just for Madeline, but for everyone who witnessed the exchange. The smallest decisions, the seemingly insignificant moments, can have the biggest consequences. And in a world where appearances often overshadow substance, it's more important than ever to challenge our biases and strive to do better. As the employees of Hamilton Prestige Motors returned to their tasks, the air felt lighter, different. The tension that had gripped the showroom was gone, replaced by a sense of anticipation. Change was coming, and while it would undoubtedly be challenging, it was also necessary. For Greg, who had always tried to see the best in people, the moment was a reminder of the importance of integrity and respect. For Madeline, it was a harsh but necessary lesson in humility and self-awareness. And for Jordan, it was a reaffirmation of his commitment to creating a company that lived up to his values. The story of that afternoon in Buckhead will be told and retold, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the power of integrity, the importance of questioning our biases, and the impact of our actions on others. In the days that followed, the dealership buzzed with quiet conversations about what had happened. Employees who had once admired Madeline's confidence and sharp instincts now questioned the culture she had helped create. Greg, who had always been more observant than outspoken, found himself reflecting on his own role in the system. Had he enabled Madeline's behavior by staying silent? Had he, in his own way, contributed to the toxic culture that Jordan had exposed? These questions weighed heavily on him, but they also inspired him to do better. He made a silent promise to himself to speak up when he saw injustice, to challenge assumptions, and to treat everyone with the respect they deserve, regardless of their appearance or background. Madeline, on the other hand, struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The loss of her job was devastating, but it was the loss of her identity that hit her the hardest. For years, she had defined herself by her success at Hamilton Prestige Motors. She had been the top sales manager, the one who could close deals that no one else could. But now, stripped of her title and her authority, she was forced to confront the person she had become. Had she always been so judgmental? Had she always been so quick to dismiss people who didn't fit her idea of a serious buyer? The answers to these questions were painful, but they were also necessary. Madeline knew that if she wanted to move forward, she would have to confront her own biases and work to become a better person. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey she knew she had to take. Jordan, meanwhile, wasted no time in implementing changes at the dealership. He held a series of meetings with the staff, emphasizing the importance of treating every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance. He introduced new training programs focused on unconscious bias in customer service, and he made it clear that discrimination of any kind would not be tolerated. The employees, many of whom had grown accustomed to the old ways, were initially resistant to the changes. But as they began to see the positive impact of Jordan's leadership, their attitudes started to shift. The showroom, once a place where judgments were made based on appearances, became a more welcoming and inclusive environment. Customers noticed a difference too, and the dealership's reputation began to improve. For Jordan, the experience was a reaffirmation of his commitment to creating a company that lived up to its values. He had taken a job as CEO not just to oversee operations, but to make a real difference. He believed that a company's success was measured not just by its profits, but by its integrity, and he was determined to lead by example. His calm but firm approach in dealing with Madeline had set the tone for the changes he wanted to implement, and it had earned him the respect of his employees. They saw in him a leader who was not afraid to confront difficult issues, who was willing to challenge the status quo, and who genuinely cared about creating a positive and inclusive workplace. The story of Madeline and Jordan is one that resonates far beyond the walls of Hamilton Prestige Motors. It's a story about the power of integrity, the importance of questioning our biases, and the impact of our actions on others. It's a reminder that even the smallest decisions can have the biggest consequences, and that we all have a responsibility to treat others with respect and dignity. If this story makes you reflect on your own assumptions, share it. Let it spark conversations that challenge the way we see the world. Let it inspire you to question your biases, to treat others with kindness and respect, and to strive to be better. Because in the end, it's not just about the cars we sell or the deals we close. It's about the people we become and the impact we have on the world around us. As the days turned into weeks, the changes at Hamilton Prestige Motors became more pronounced. The showroom, once a place of tension and judgment, became a space of inclusivity and respect. Employees who had once been hesitant to speak up now felt empowered to challenge assumptions and advocate for fairness. Customers, too, noticed the difference. The dealership, once known for its exclusivity, became a place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of their appearance or background. Sales improved, not just because of the quality of the vehicles, but because of the quality of the service. People wanted to do business with a company that valued integrity and treated its customers with respect. For Madeline, the journey of self-reflection was a difficult one. She had spent years building her career, only to see it crumble in a matter of minutes. But in the aftermath of her dismissal, she began to see things more clearly. She realized that her success had come at cost, not just to herself but to others. She had been so focused on closing deals and meeting targets that she had lost sight of what truly mattered, treating people with respect and dignity. It was a hard lesson to learn, but it was one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. She knew that if she wanted to move forward, she would have to confront her own biases and work to become a better person. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey she was determined to take. Jordan, meanwhile, continued to lead by example. He knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but he was committed to creating a company that lived up to its values. He held regular meetings with the staff, encouraging open dialogue and fostering a culture of inclusivity. He also made it a point to lead by example, treating everyone, employees and customers alike, with the same level of respect and dignity. His calm but firm approach had set the tone for the changes he wanted to implement, and had earned him the respect of his employees. They saw in him a leader who was not afraid to confront difficult issues, who was willing to challenge the status quo, and who genuinely cared about creating a positive and inclusive workplace. The story of that afternoon in Buckhead will be told and retold, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the power of integrity, the importance of questioning our biases, and the impact of our actions on others. It's a story that challenges us to look inward, to confront our own assumptions, and to strive to be better. It's a reminder that even the smallest decisions can have the biggest consequences, and that we all have a responsibility to treat others with respect and dignity. If this story makes you reflect on your own assumptions, share it. Let it spark conversations that challenge the way we see the world. Let it inspire you to question your biases, to treat others with kindness and respect, and to strive to be better. Because in the end, it's not just about the cars we sell or the deals we close. It's about the people we become and the impact we have on the world around us.